started. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and welcome everybody. I'm very excited to have you here. And let's get started. There we go. So can you all see the PowerPoint? Yes, awesome. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about teaching an honors class first, and then I'll walk through the Courseleaf process if you want to add an addendum to create an honors class. And then, and I have screenshots of that. So if you would like after that, we should have enough time. I can actually show you live how it looks as well. So we can do that. And I have 2 spaces where you can ask questions, and you can always put questions in the chat if you like as well, but I'm going to try and just answer them after I go through my presentation, if that works for everyone. Everybody good? Yeah, ready? Okay, so this is teaching honors from Courseleaf to Classroom. And the first thing that I really want to start with are what are our goals? Because when you teach a class, or at least when I teach a class, I want to have in mind what my goals are, not just for the content, but what is it that I want the students to take away besides what I'm teaching them about the content. So the overarching kind of goals for the program in the classroom are to increase and strengthen student skills for college, but also for work and life. So I'll dig into these a little more with some more specifics on the next slide, but that's really a big part of what I see us doing in the honors program. So we want to provide opportunities for them beyond what's considered a traditional learning modality, right? We want contextualized learning, applied learning, where they can apply what they're learning and do hands-on activities, problem solving, experimenting, and tying it to their real life so that it's relevant for them and to their experiences and their knowledge. And I think today's keynote presentation was really good on those key points too, about how do we bring in all these different experiences and different forms of knowledge so that everyone in our classrooms feel included and valued, right? So that there's not just one way of looking at these topics. So some of the student skills that we want to develop and strengthen include things like critical thinking skills. And before we can actually strengthen those, we really need to explain to students what those are, because a lot of them don't know what critical thinking skills are, right? And so I go over that with my students to help them understand that it doesn't mean that you're necessarily criticizing things, but that you're being able to evaluate information, right? So we want to develop that ability in them even more. Problem solving skills. So when you bump up to a problem, how do you solve it? How do you approach it? What do you do? And that ties into having a growth mindset, because a lot of our students actually have very fixed mindsets and are really just focused on the grade more than the learning process. And some of them are very afraid of making mistakes because they're so focused on that grade. For instance, and this is in my honors and non-honors classes, where I have students who they freak out because they miss an assignment, but I have an extra assignment so they can miss it. So I drop their lowest score. And, you know, even with that, they're like, oh, can I just read? Can I do this? Can I turn it in late? And it's like, it's okay. That'll just be the one that's dropped, you know? So, but they're trying to be perfect in getting everything in sometimes. And so we want to help them learn that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to take a risk, that you can try things. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. You can, you know, try something new, right? Learn from it and then move forward. And then also we want to encourage them to have grit, that determination, because as a lot of our students are low income, first gen, things like that, they face a lot of challenges. And so we want to help them build that grit up so that they don't give up, so that they know they belong here. They belong in school, they belong in college, they belong in the honors program, right? We want to help them develop skills with collaboration so that it's not just about how to work independently, which they do need to know, but how do you work well with others too, right? And so I'll talk more about that coming up, how to manage their time well, how to do presentations and public speaking, which also ties into leadership skills, which is something else that we're helping them build, as well as things like improved writing skills, improved reading skills, their professionalism skills, because these are things that they're going to need, right? And all of our students need these. In the honors program, we often focus on research skills, which are important too, but it's not the only thing that we want them to learn. But when we talk about research skills, they need to understand what are reliable sources and how do you find them? Like, how do you search a database in the library and things like that? What's the difference between a book review and an actual scholarly peer-reviewed journal, that kind of thing, right? How to make and support their points, or how to draw and support their conclusions and things like that. We also want to help them with their application skills. And what I mean by that is a lot of our students, particularly in the honors program, are going to be applying to transfer, and sometimes they have to write a statement for transfer, sometimes they don't. They often apply for scholarships and grants and things like that, and prizes. So how do you do that, right? How do you apply for a scholarship? How do you represent yourself in that essay that asks you to tell everything about yourself, or why you're deserving of this scholarship or whatever it is, right? And I know that when I first entered those kinds of spaces, it was very uncomfortable for me to try and write about myself, because it felt like I was bragging and it didn't feel right. It wasn't comfortable. So that's something that we can help our students with as well. So some things to consider while we're building those skills are things like equity and access. Honors programs are often thought of as elitist because we are taking students with those high GPAs and giving them, special learning environments. And I just want to point out that we are a Hispanic serving institution. At least half of our students are first-gen students. A majority of our students are lower income, and we also have a large chunk of non-traditional students. So if we can recruit those students into our program, we are actually giving those students support for college and helping them have enhanced opportunities to be able to do well in college and then transfer well. To give you an example of one of our recent graduates, Paulina, she came from a household that couldn't afford to send 2 kids to college. So her brother went to a 4-year university. She came to us. She was in our honors program. She did phenomenal. She's now at Yale. So, we give those students those opportunities. And she's Hispanic, low income, first gen student. So think about that, right? And so for me, equity and access is about how do we get more students into our program? And in addition to that, the way that you teach your honors courses is going to influence how you teach your non-honors courses. And that also helps with equity and access. And so we'll talk more about that coming up. So another thing about first-gen students to keep in mind is that they often have what's called imposter syndrome. And that may even be worse in an honors program, is that they might not feel like they deserve to be in college, that they're smart enough to be in college, that someone's going to figure that out, that maybe they fooled everybody. And so they're a little scared sometimes to let you know what they know, or to let you know what they don't know. So they might be afraid to ask questions or to say they don't understand something, for example. And in an honors program, that could actually be worse. They could be afraid that, they're going to get kicked out of the honors program, or all these other people are really smart, and so they shouldn't even apply to the honors program. So that's another thing that we have to think about, and that they might have this fear, and they might actually underachieve because they're also afraid that if they give it their all and they aren't successful, well, then see, everybody was right. And I can tell you that as a first-gen student, I had imposter syndrome. I still sometimes have imposter syndrome as a full-time instructor, so this doesn't necessarily go away, but you learn how to deal with it. And so if we can support our students and be aware that some of them may be feeling that way, and reach out to them and support them and let them know that they do deserve to be in college, To give you another example of a student who was one of my students, and she's now in a PhD program at UC San Diego. And we were just texting the other day because we're still in touch with each other. And she was saying that, you know, she was a non-traditional student. She's a little bit older, single mom, Hispanic, right? And she was saying that if it wasn't for me, she wouldn't be in that PhD program. And I was saying, no, you did all the hard work, right? So, but it's true, I can support her and I can mentor her and I can encourage her. She did the hard part, but it means something to them. You know, it keeps them going, and it lets them believe in themselves if we believe in them and tell them that we believe in them. So some things to consider. With that, let's look at some of our current ideas that are being used by different instructors. And this is by no means an extensive list. This is just to get us going. So one of the things that's common in a lot of honors approaches is research projects. And those are great. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm going to give you some other ideas too. But that's one of the places that a lot of people start, is they differentiate their honors class from their non-honors class by adding a research project. And there's a research project that I do that I'll share with you too. But there's a way to do that that also will help build their skills. So I want you to think about, if you do a research project, think about how to build their skills in writing abstracts, annotated bibliographies, you know, outlining their papers, things like that, because those are skills that they're going to need when they transfer as well. So I'll share more with that. Response papers, which are basically opportunities for them to respond to either videos that they've watched or topics that are covered in your class or readings that you have or discussions that you've had, because it starts to help them develop their ability for critical thinking, but also for, you know, explaining their perspectives and then supporting that with evidence and things like that. But it helps them get that expression going. You can include discussions where you have discussion leaders. So maybe you divide up the semester or the week and say, okay, you know, so-and-so is going to be our discussion leader for Tuesday's class, and so-and-so is going to be the discussion leader for Thursday's class. And so they know ahead of time when they're going to be the leader, and then they have to come in and actually lead the discussion. And so they learn leadership skills with that. They learn discussion skills with that, critical thinking skills, and also preparation and time management. Like, how are you going to discuss this? What do you want to bring out? How do you do that? Right? It also teaches them questioning skills. And so I've also in my class used discussion questions where I have them write discussion questions and bring those to class and then share them. And then we can pick out some of those and use them to lead our discussion that way too. And it also helps them have more buy-in into the class and into the topic. And so they get engaged in a different way too. You can do group activities. I do group activities, but I always give them individual grades. So everybody has a component they're responsible for, and they get graded on that component, which helps stop some of the trepidation that students have about group projects, because they're always afraid that they're going to be the one that does all the work, and then everyone else is going to kind of ride on their coattails. Right? So to stop that, I do individual grades, and I also do peer grading, where part of their grade is based on how their peers grade their participation in the group. And I give them very specific guidelines, like, did they communicate with the group? Did they do their part? You know, things like that. So think about setting those types of parameters up if you do group activities, because it helps give the students a little more control and less fear about it. But then it also helps them learn how to work together. And that teamwork is really important, that collaboration. Flipped classrooms are another idea. And flipped classrooms, if you're not familiar, is when instead of doing a lot of things in your lecture, like lecturing to the students or showing a video or things like that, you flip that and you have the students do that before they get to you. And so what they do with you looks more like what you might assign for homework, like problem solving or maybe doing the discussion and taking that at a deeper level. So you're not lecturing to them. They've already, and with Zoom now, you could actually record lectures and have them watch those before they come, like where you're covering terms, for example, or concepts that you want them to understand, so that by the time they get into the classroom with you, they should already have that background knowledge, and then you can take it deeper with you. So these are some ideas that have been in place in other spaces, and some of our honors faculty use them really, really well. Senya is one of them that does a phenomenal job. So I highly recommend reaching out to Senya if you want to know more about flipped classrooms, because she has a lot of experience with that and has done it very well. So problem solving, debate, applied, contextualized learning. These are more like hands-on learning opportunities. STEM is a really good place for this, but it's not the only place that you can do this. So you can think of this as those spaces where you give students a problem and you let them figure out, how do I address that? And I'll give you an example coming up that Dave Carey does that's really fun and excellent. To give you a couple examples that I have, one I've used in class, one I have not. One is a reciprocity game. And to help students understand what reciprocity is, which is the exchange of items, or you could think of it also as favors, right? So for example, if you're moving and somebody helps you move, and then you kind of owe them in a reciprocity way if you want to maintain that relationship. So usually on the day they help you move, maybe you give them pizza and beer, for instance, right? And then down the road, you know, they should help you move, or you should help them move if they move. Does that make sense? Right? Birthday gifts or Christmas gifts or Hanukkah gifts, those are also a type of reciprocity too. So with the reciprocity game, it takes them and divides them into groups. And so it's like if they're in a foraging society, which is hunting gathering type, or pastoral, which is more like small, losing the word, it's not coming to me, herding, animal herding. Thank you, came to my head, and someone's nodding. I'm like, thanks. So what they do is they're given pigs. So everybody starts off with 4 pigs, and they start off as children who need to go through a puberty rite to become adults. But to be able to go into adulthood, they each need 6 pigs. So they only have 4. You can't buy a pig, you can't sell a pig. So how are you going to get those other 2 pigs? So they have to use their power of persuasion. They have to figure out, you know, or maybe they trade with each other and say, make deals, right? Like, if you give me 2 pigs now, then when I get some more pigs, I'll give you 2 pigs. And that way you can go through your puberty ritual. You follow? So they have to start figuring this out. And as they go through, there's different things that they can get married, and that takes like 10 pigs to get married. They can have children, and that takes a certain number of pigs. And they get a necklace for each thing that they do. And so it's really fun because there's not that many rules to the game. So they start having to figure things out. And sometimes some of them will say, well, could we have more than one spouse? And so I say, well, that's up to the group, right? So group, what do you think? Is polygamy okay in your group? And some will say yes. And I've never actually had anyone say no to that request. So they say yes. And then they can have multiple because they want the necklaces, which is really interesting because there's no real way to win the game. So they're creating their own idea of what it means to win. And some of them think to win is to have the most pigs. Some think to win is to have the most necklaces, right? Some think to win is to have the most relationships with people and help the most people get the necklaces or the pigs, which is really interesting because they're all taking it in a different space or a different way. And so I let them play, and we go through, and they get their pigs, they get their necklaces, and we go through. And the very first time that I did this, I wasn't sure what to expect. So I covered the terms, let them play the game. I gave them the rules, they played the game. And then we did like a discussion debriefing afterwards. And I learned a lot from that, and they seemed to enjoy it and learn a lot from it. So the next time that I did it, I added more components. So this is part of also growth mindset. They knew that that was the first time I had done this. And I told them that. And I tease my students, I tell them, okay, you guys are going to be my guinea pigs. But that's growth mindset, right? It's showing them, hey, we're going to experiment. We're going to try this out. I think this is going to be a good learning tool. If it's not okay, well, then I'm either going to have to tweak it or I'm not going to use it again. And as I have the students play this game more and more, I learn more from each time. And so I ended up eventually adding a self-reflection paper to it. So I let them play, and then at the end, for the next class, they just had to write a short little reflection about, you know, what did they think were the lessons of the game? What did they learn from it? If they could do it again, what would they do differently and why? Or if they wouldn't do anything, why not? Differently, why not? And then who do they think won the game and why? And then I have them bring that to class, and then we share our answers and then talk about that. And then because this is for my intro to cultural class. So we're looking at how culture shapes how we interpret things and how we think about things, how we do things. And so different answers bring out different parts of our enculturation, or how culture is shaping how we think about things. So it's a wonderful learning experience, and it's fun. They get a lot out of it. Every time that I do it, I learn something more too, and I keep tweaking it. Now, unfortunately, since COVID has hit, I haven't been able to do this game. So, because I've been teaching on Zoom. So, you know, once I'm able to get back into a classroom again, I hope to bring this back, but it's been a wonderful experience. Now, the Shadi marriage game is actually about arranged marriage in India. And by the way, both of these I got from attending conferences, anthropological conferences. And so other people actually created these games and then shared them for free with those of us who are in attendance. So think about that too. If you attend conferences, sometimes you'll get these kinds of hands-on activities from them that you can try out. And you can look at web pages and things like that to look for these kinds of games as well. So with the arranged marriage game, it's specifically looking at arranged marriage in India. And the person who put the game together has wonderful resources about the different regions of India and the different religions that are in place in India, and the different aspects to arranged marriage that have to be thought about. And so the students get divided into little families with parents and a child who needs to get married. And so each family is given a set of circumstances, like where they come from, what their religion is, what their interests are in the marriage, like in the marriage partner, what are they looking for, what their characteristics are, and so on, and their views. And then they have to go around and meet other parents who also need to get their child married and see if they can find a matching family. And they rank certain families so that they get to decide, you know, which family they think is the number one person, you know, for their child, and the number two, and so on. And then if their number one choice agrees, then they have a match, and it takes it to the next level. If not, then they have to go to their next person, and so on, until they hopefully get a match. But not everyone does. And that's real life too. Not everyone does. And so if they get a match, then they get a scenario card, and they take it to the next level where they have to actually negotiate with each other different points of things that they have to think about. Like, for example, if there's a wife, is she expected to work outside the home after marriage, or is she expected to stay in the home? And different families have different ideas about that, right? So they may have to negotiate that. Or education level, or things like that that might not quite match. And so in that negotiation process, sometimes some of the matches fall apart. And then if they actually get through that part, then they get to get married. So the whole point is to give them a hands-on understanding. And it's not just what they're experiencing as their family unit, but how they're seeing all the other family units go through this process. And then there's a debriefing too, where everybody is sharing their experiences and what was difficult and what was challenging and what new things did they learn and so on. And so, like I said, I haven't been able to play this yet, but I'm looking forward to being able to do that at some point when I'm back on campus in person. But these are the kinds of ideas that I want you to explore and think about, because they're so much fun from an educator point of view and from a student point of view, but there's such an enriching learning experience. So think about that. So for a more specific example, I'm gonna tell you what Brian, those of you should know Brian Waddington by now, right? So he teaches history, and he does a research paper that requires the use of secondary and primary sources. And that helps students learn what that means. Like, what is a primary source, what's a secondary source? And again, it goes into reliable, valid sources. They have to complete an abstract that summarizes the thesis and their sources. And this is preparing them to participate in the HTCC, which is the Honors Transfer Council of California conference. It's held every spring at UCI, and the Bay Honors Consortium Conference that is held at either Stanford or UC Berkeley. And so they get the opportunity to submit their abstract for that, and then do a presentation, which gives them presentation skills, but they can also win scholarships. They can also get published. And so these are really great opportunities for community college students to get, presentation skills, to get publications under their belt, and to also win scholarships and grants and things like that. So this is part of what he does to teach them these skills, but to also give them these other opportunities. And Dave Carey, who teaches astronomy, he experiments in his honors courses, and so do I, by the way. So a lot of honors professors do this, where they try things out in the honors classes because they're smaller, and then use these ideas in their non-honors courses in some format. And so he does a flipped classroom where students get interactive lectures that are completed before they come into their classroom with him. And then with him, he does active learning in the class with problem solving, both at an individual level and a group level, and they have discussions with him. And so he gives students in his honors classes very broad questions to answer. And I'll give you a little more specific information in a second. But he does this more broadly with honors students. And now he's doing this with his non-honors classes as well. But in his non-honors classes, he gives the students a little more guidance and more things to think about in the questions. So the questions that he provides to the non-honors students are a little tighter. And then the ones for the honors students are broader. So they have to use more of their skills to come up with the answers. So one of the things that he was sharing with me to share with you was that he would ask, for example, the honor students would get questions like, what is the cause of the seasons? And the non-honors classes would get something more like a detailed breakdown of that question, with things like to think about the role of the tilt in the seasons, the tilt of the earth in the seasons, how the seasons are different in the northern and southern hemispheres and things like that. But his honors students don't get that support at first, at least, right? So he's trying to get them to pull that in on their own. And then in his honors class, that he does not do in his non-honors, is he also asks them to work in groups and as a class to develop a plan for a robotic mission to Saturn's moon Titan. And so each group focuses on different aspects of Titan science, like geology, atmosphere, or life. And they have to come up with the main outstanding questions that need to be answered, what sort of instruments could they use to answer them. And then as a class, they have to come together and prioritize the different instruments that'll be sent on the spacecraft. And there's never enough room. So they have to negotiate this, like what's going to stay, what's going to go, why is this one more important than that one, and so on. That's that problem solving and critical thinking skills again. And so all of the groups have a chance to address their science question, and that forces the different groups to consider how to compromise to help the whole group. So this is a really good example of how you can do this. Now, Sonia gave me two different examples to share with you, and she teaches history and humanities. And she said pre-COVID, she focused on giving the students a research workshop that would support students, again, presenting at that HTCC conference at ECI, and for learning research skills. And so her whole goal with this was to make sure that students would know how to do things like write an abstract and do an annotated bibliography, how to search library databases and things like that. So they would have those skills before they transferred. So she didn't want her students to transfer to a four-year college and not know those skills. So her whole point was to make sure that they knew what those things were so that they were prepared, right? And so she really wanted to make sure they had that. Now, during COVID, she switched things up a little and started doing theme learning with her students to create where they would have to take a theme and then create a PowerPoint or a video presentation of how the theme was present in the course content. And they would complete those presentations prior to the class meeting, and they would see each other's presentations. And then when they came together on Zoom, they would discuss those presentations so that they could see how different students who chose different themes or same themes could have different perspectives or pull different things out of the content, and how that enriched how everyone else saw it, right? Because they're all showing their diverse views. And it helped them see how narratives are created, and then also how they're created differently from different points of view, how they get interpreted differently, and how they evaluated the theme that they chose. So all of this is critical thinking skills again, too. And so she had the students keep the same theme throughout the whole course to see how it applied to each different topic, and then see how that changed over time as they got exposed to how others saw it, how they understood their theme differently or maybe more, and it improved their evidence analysis skills. So like, what's your evidence for this? So it helped them improve those skills over time. And it ended with a final project to reflect on how it changed over time in the class so they could see that growth. So these are all really great ideas. And then one of the research options that I do in my cultural class right now that I developed. So I'm giving you kind of the developed end of it. When I first started it, it wasn't as where it is today, right? So I do a current events research project, and this is an intro to cultural anthropology class. So there's really nothing off limits in that. And so I tell them to pick a current event. And so, for example, COVID, right? That's a current event. This was, when I first started this, the Me Too movement was really gaining a lot of traction, and students still talk about that as well. The issues with Black Lives Matter, policing issues, you know, anything that they want to talk about. And I don't tell them to talk about any particular topic, they get to choose. And that's part of making it relevant to them. And they have chosen some really awesome topics that I wouldn't have even thought maybe to give them. And so it's great. Like I had a student who did one on fast fashion, which is, if you don't know, which I didn't know either, is basically it's the cheap fashion. You know, the fashion trends change all the time. And so fast fashion is basically fashion that's made in sweatshops, and it's disposable, so it contributes to landfills, and there's all kinds of issues about it. And she went off on all of it and did a great research paper. So, you know, let them pick the topics, and a lot of times you're going to learn something new yourself, right? So they have to do an abstract, and I call it a proposal, because that way, that layer, if they're off track and doing something that won't fit the parameters of the research project, then I can catch it then and hopefully fix it. They also have to do an annotated bibliography, which again helps them learn what an annotated bibliography is, how to find scholarly sources, how to research things in a library database. So all of these skills are getting put together. They also have to summarize. So that's a writing skill. And then they turn that into a paper. Now, the parameters of this is that they have to pick an issue that has a problem to solve in current events, and it has to be, relevant, right, to them. And once they have this research topic with a problem to be solved, they have to figure out how to use anthropology, applied anthropology, to address it, to either provide a solution or to help bring people together to talk about it, or maybe interview to get more information about what the issues are and things like that. So if they pick something that doesn't really have a problem, then I have to redirect them, and that happens a lot, right? Because they think of it as just a research paper, but it's more than that. And so they tie it back into the anthropology class, and it works really well. Again, Paulina, the woman I mentioned earlier, who's now at Yale, she took her project paper from this, presented it at HTCC, and then also used it in her Yale interview. So it benefited her in a couple different spaces, and she was able to go to Yale, not just because of that. I don't mean that, but it didn't hurt, right? She could use it as an example. So the other thing I wanted to point out with this is that I reached out to Sarah and Elizabeth in the library, who are wonderful resources. So make sure to use the resources that are available to you. And they put a library page together for my class with all kinds of support, with links to websites on how to do an annotated bibliography, also a little short how-to video on how to do an annotated bibliography. So I don't have to teach that in my class specifically. I have the librarians help me teach them how to do that. Okay. And then also they put together a Zoom video now, but when we were in person, they came to my class and they put together a handout on how to use the databases and how to search for things for a scholarly source, what that meant, how to do the search and so on. And now that we're on Zoom, they put together Zoom videos for me on that. So that supports the students as well. The Writing Center is also happy to put together writing workshops. You just need to contact them ahead of time and ask them. So they'll do them on how to write an abstract or a good abstract, right? How to do an annotated bibliography, how to write a research paper. So they're more than happy to help set up workshops, and they'll do them during your class time if you want, or they can even set them up outside of your class time, whatever works best for you. So make sure to use them as support because they're wonderful resources. So for this portion of this presentation, the thing that I really want to drive home is to be flexible and be creative. Don't be afraid, right? Experiment, model that growth mindset, that problem solving and the grit and so on. Model that for your students so they can see what that looks like. Because if it's okay for you to do those things, it makes it okay for them to do those things too, right? To make mistakes or to not even a mistake, just to try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, it's okay. You learn from that. And then how can you maybe tweak that to make it work later, right? You have small classes, so you can try things out with the classes. And then as you get better at them and they work well for those classes, think about how you could use them in your non-honors classes too, and enrich those spaces as well. And sometimes you may need to modify them a little bit, but you can take them into those spaces. Trust yourself and your students, that they want to learn, that they want to be there, and know that it's okay. You can do this. You can give it a try. And then try and bring in student ownership by making it relevant to them, getting their participation in there. You can even have students help create the projects with you, or pick the course topics. So that definitely helps them have buy-in and participate in a different way. And then, like I was just saying, ask for help and support and ideas from your fellow honors instructors and support services like the library, the Learning Center, the Writing Center, and so on. So before I move into Courseleaf, I just thought I would give everyone a moment if anyone has any questions at this point that you want to ask. You can unmute yourself or you can type something in the chat. Or if you have something that you do in your class that works that you want to share, that would be great too. Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. I'm glad. Nothing, everybody good? I'll have a little bit of time at the end too, but before I moved into Courseleaf, which is a little slightly different direction, it's obviously tied to this. Okay, then we'll come back to questions at the end. So the next part that I want to show you is now you're excited to teach honors classes, and maybe there isn't an honors class for you to teach yet, or maybe you want to add more honors courses to your course offerings, because as we build a larger program, we actually need more variation in our coursework right now, because I often get students who want to apply to be in the honors program, but unfortunately they've taken the courses that we offer. And so there's not 5 classes for them to take to finish the program. And so they end up not getting into the program for that reason. And so one of the solutions for that is to get them earlier. And another solution is to have more variation in our course content to broaden that out. And also I'm hoping to grow the program so that we have more students to fill more classes. And so having more variation makes more sense that way too. So if you have a course that you would like to propose, the first thing you're going to do is sign into Courseleaf. And the first part of that is to click on the green button that says propose a new course. Even if you're going to piggyback it off, like for example, I have the intro to cultural class is Anthro 210, and we have a non-honors section of that and an honors section. But the honors is technically its own class, but it's connected to that first one. So you're going to click on the propose a new course, but you're not going to have to start it from scratch if you're making an honors version of a course that already exists. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So the next step is to add any, oh yeah, sorry, could I say that again? Yeah, so let's say that you have a history class, like History 108, I'm just gonna say, but you wanna make an honors section of that. Or for my class, for anthropology. I have an Anthro 212, which is Intro to Biological Anthropology, and I wanna make that into an honors class. So I already have the non-honors version. So I'm going to use that as the base for the honors version. So even though I have to propose a new class, I'm not really starting from scratch. Does that help? Okay, good. All right, so the next thing you have to do is if you're going to have any co-contributors, like anyone else in your department is going to also be contributing to that, you just want to put their name in there, and you have to click on the proposed start term. Now, I'm just going to tell you that's not really going to be accurate. So when I was putting the screenshots together, it was telling me that the next proposed start term is fall 2022. So even if you're doing your addendums today, you're not going to be in the schedule in fall 2022, just so you know. It's a longer process than that, but it's the only option that it lets you choose. So just choose whatever it tells you, and then I'll explain how the real process is. So the next thing that you're going to do is where at the very top, it's got a green button there that says propose new from existing course. You're going to click on that green button. And essentially what you're going to be doing is copying the non-honors course into this course form. And that'll be what's going to get you started. So that way you don't have to put all that information in again. Is everyone good with that? Yeah. Okay. So when you click on that, there's going to be a little pop-up box that's going to warn you that if you continue, it's going to overwrite everything. Just click OK, because there's nothing to overwrite if you're following it step by step like this, because it's pretty much a blank document. So then you're going to get this little pop-up box that's right here on the right side of the screen. And in that pop-up box, the top line, you have to select Citrus College, And then the second line, you're going to select your subject. So whatever, I'm anthropology, so that's what you see there. And then your courses that are already in Courseleaf will populate. You're going to click on the course that you want to copy. So I was using Anthro 212 as an example. So I would click on that, and then you're going to click on the bottom where it says add selected. Once you do that, it populates everything from that class into this new course. So then you have to now make it into an honors course. And to do that, you have to add an H to the number. So for Anthro 212, we also have a lab. So I have in the sample here, you can see where it says 212L, and I had to add an H onto that because that indicates that it's an honors class. And you can see underneath that it says honors courses must be followed by an H. And then in the course title, you have to add the word honors to both the long title and the short title. And you might have to adjust your short title to make it fit because the short title is very limited in the number of spaces. So I had to change how I had the short title to make it fit. If you don't do that, you won't get the honors addendum. And you have to have the honors addendum in order to add in what's going to make this class an honors class. But the honors addendum only shows once you've made these changes. So far, so good. And I'll show you a live version of this if it helps after. So once you've done that, you scroll down past all the filled in information to the honors addendum, which will be empty. And it has two parts to it. The first part asks you to put in the following additional criteria will augment this course to make it an honors course. Now, you don't have to be very specific here. In fact, it's better if you're a little broad because you don't want to constrain yourself to only certain activities or certain ideas. So you want to put something here. This is from my Anthro 210 cultural course. That's an honors course. The honors addendum says, for that first answer, student-led small discussion groups applying anthropological knowledge to readings and lecture materials to foster leadership skills, participation in a research project, exposing students to different cultures with the purpose of removing culture shock and understanding experiencing fieldwork. This research will also provide them the opportunity to practice leadership skills, presentation skills, and computer skills. And even that's probably more specific than I needed to be. And I was kind of piggybacking off of what had already been there before, because this was created before I was hired. So I was just updating it a little. And if I were to update it today, I would probably make it even broader and just say they would have a research project and hands-on activities that they could practice their skills on. And, the small discussion groups is still applicable, or, leading discussions for that. So you can be very broad here. Because it's just asking you what types of things do you want to add to the honors experience, right? And then the second part is to list additional measurable instructional objectives that the honors student will be expected to accomplish. Now, this is in addition to the objectives that you're already going to have from the non-honors version of the course, okay? And it'll just have one box there. I recommend having at least 2 objectives. I know there's 4 here. I sometimes go overboard. It's just so the 4 examples that are here are things like recognize and analyze anthropological concepts in the everyday world through daily observation and research, heavy use of critical thinking skills in presentation and essay formats, demonstrate an appreciation for human and cultural diversity across societies, and develop and increase a growth mindset and grit in approaching problem solving in challenging situations. If I was to update this today, I'd probably get rid of number 3 because that's already in both honors and non-honors versions. So it's not really necessary to put it there, if that makes sense, because it's already in the original objectives. That's just stated slightly differently, but it's the same objective. So think about what objectives do you want them to get? You know, do you want them to develop better research skills? Do you want them to develop leadership and presentation skills? What is it that you expect them to accomplish? Or maybe to be able to apply the knowledge from your class to, you know, current events or relative topics outside of the classroom or something like that. Okay, once you filled that in, you're essentially done with the honors portion, unless you want to make some other changes, like maybe adding other textbooks or materials like that into the course. And once that's finished, then you want to save changes. That's the middle button there, save changes. And if you're all ready, you can click the green button that says start workflow. Then it goes through the whole curriculum process, just like any other course does. So you get feedback and people will review it and look for things that may need changing. And they'll give you comments, and then you respond to those comments. And then once it gets approved through that process, which can take about a year, then the course has to go through the curriculum processes of getting IGETC approval and Cal State University approval. We can't put it in the schedule until it has both of those. So it has to be approved and transferred. Now I know that they just recently changed the laws on that, and so that will eventually impact us. So it'll have to get whatever approval comes out of that new legal process, but it has to be transferable and approved. And once that happens, then we can put it into the schedule. So it's about a 2 to 3 year process currently for all the approvals to get into place for us to consider putting you into the schedule. So I would encourage you, if you are thinking about adding courses, even if you are not sure you want to teach it, or maybe someone else would want to teach it, or maybe you're interested in putting it in there, but you're not sure how you would want to teach it, let me help you. We'll get it into Courseleaf. We'll get it through the approval process, because it's always better to have it as an option and not use it than to wish you had it and not be able to teach it. So I'm more than happy to help you do this. And it doesn't take very long. Once you've done one and you have kind of the feel for it, you can do more. And I look at it like the more classes we have in our course options, the better, because it gives us more flexibility to meet our student needs and our program needs to help our students complete and graduate and get what they need out of the program. So I'm always more is better in that respect. So would you like me to show you this in live time? Or are you good? Yes, okay. All right, so let me stop sharing here. And then I will set that up. And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let me know. Okay, can you see the Courseleaf page? Okay, so basically this is after you sign in, this is the first page that you'll see. So then you click on this propose a new course. Oh, let me just sign in really quickly here. So click on propose start. You see that there was only one option, right? So I have no other option but fall. And then I want to, before I do anything else, I'm not going to touch anything else. I'm going to click on this green button, propose new from existing course. Gives me the warning. I say, okay. I have to select Citrus College. Then I select anthropology. And then I'm going to go with the lab. So see really quickly here, now it has added everything from that non-honors course. But you'll see there is no honors addendum, right? So there's nothing for me to fill in for honors because I haven't told it that it's going to be an honors class yet. That's why you must make those changes that I told you about before. So, oh, thanks. I just opened the chat because I realized it had closed on me. So you put in 212L, which was the original numbers, and I have to add an H to make it honors. I need to add the word honors to the long course title. I don't think it'll let me. See, it's not enough letters. So I have to change my short title here. It's not best, but okay. So now I have honors there. Now, if I scroll down, see how this is filled in, course objectives and all of that, right? Now I have an honors addendum. It's like magic. So here's where you're going to put in the additional criteria that you would add in. So something like, you know, adding a research project and something else, right? So you explain that, and then you'll see there's only one objective here. So maybe to increase growth mindset through experimentation projects, something like that. If you want to add more, you just click on this green button and then you get another box to add another one. If you change your mind, you just click on the X. And then when you're ready, you save or start workflow. And since I'm going to do this later with a little more thought, I'm going to cancel it. But if you click cancel, it erases the whole thing. So Laura is asking in the chat if there's a minimum number of objectives or a recommended amount. I would recommend 2, just so that you have 2 things that you would like to see the honors students get out of the class. But there is no necessarily any limit, but the more objectives you have, the more challenging it can be. And you want to think about program review, because when you update your courses or things like that, you don't want too many objectives. And when I first started, it was recommended that 2 to 3 were the best. And this class already has non-honors objectives. And so you're adding these in for honors courses specifically. So I would say, you know, 1 or 2 is probably plenty. Great question. Any other questions? Any information that you'd like, or even just about the program or anything? Or things you'd like to share if you teach honors already? What do you do that you found to be successful?
You know, Jennifer, I don't have anything specific to share, but I would just always point out when people want to teach an honors class, I encourage them to do it for a lot of reasons. But one of them is that honors classes are they're fun. They should be fun. It should be fun for them, more fun for the student and more fun for you, the teacher, really. Not less. It should, the objectives should make this course a little more demanding, but definitely if you're not having fun teaching honors, then you shouldn't do it.
That's also a really good point too, is because a lot of our students are afraid to join the honors program because in their mind, honors courses are just harder courses, right? But what I really want you to think about is approaching them as enriching spaces, not harder, right? But where you're taking the information and helping students dig into it deeper, you know, get more out of it, to be able to experience it in a way that maybe you can't do in a larger class setting, right? And that's what I want students to understand. And that's what I want us to understand as instructors, right? It's not about making your class harder. because I'm sure your non-honors classes are just as rigorous as they need to be, right? So the rigor that you have in your non-honors course is probably just fine for your honors course. It's just to help them move into spaces that you usually can't do. Like I can't do a current events paper in my non-honors version in that class, mostly because, you know, pre-COVID, it was 41 students. Right? So I'm not gonna have, or 45 if it's fully online. So I don't have this, you know, the time to be able to grade like that and to add that in. But in a smaller class, I can do that, and I can have them do applied projects and try out how do you apply what you're learning. And I do that in other ways in my non-honors classes too, but not in as a research project, if that makes sense, right? Yeah, go ahead, Tasha.
Well, first, I'm going to say that I absolutely agree with Carson that teaching honors courses are a lot of fun. And second, one of the things that I do in my honors class that's different from my traditional class that's non-honors is I have a service learning project that's a semester-long project. And they have to work in groups and they have to learn how to work with each other. And I found the service learning project is beneficial because it is a service learning project, but it's also really helpful to have them have a whole project that takes a whole semester that they have to work together in the same group. And they get to pick their groups and they get to pick their projects, but once they do, that's it. You know, they can't come back and say, oh, I don't like so-and-so, and I want to be in a different group, you know. And I've had a lot of fun teaching honors, and I'll just share that with you. I really enjoy my honors students. And I teach it more as a seminar, which is one thing I do different than from it's less lecture and more seminar and more group work. And the students really seem to like the group work. That's all I'll share.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they do like to work together a lot of times, you know, and that's one of the benefits of being in the honors program is it can give them that sense of community because they're with the same students oftentimes in several classes. And so they get to know each other through taking those smaller classes with each other over and over again. And, you know, unfortunately, since we've been on Zoom, they've lost a little bit of their social spaces, but a lot of them are also part of our PTK and AGS honor societies, and that fortunately has provided them a space to be able to still meet and do things together as well. So that helps. Yeah, go ahead, Tasha.
One other thing that I add is in my traditional classes, I have my students turn their homework in a file folder. And then that way it's confidential when I return their grades and my comments and so on. But towards the end of the semester, I pretty much have a sense of what students might be really successful in an honors class. And so I take that honors brochure and put it in there with a personal Post-it note that says, I think you should look into this. I think you'd be great in the honors program. And just the fact, I've had students come back to me and say, you think I'm an honors student? And I'm like, yes, I do. You know, but just that validation and that personal touch helps to build our honors program.
I agree. And, you know, and even in, I just taught a winter fully online course, and I do the same thing in my comments when I grade their assignments. I'll put things like, you should really think about applying for the honors program. Email me if you want more information. And I will do that over and over. And even if I may have told them that on every single assignment, and I've had several students tell me, even if they can't, you know, because they're getting ready to graduate in spring or something like that, and they can't join the honors program, they thank me for, you know, saying that to them for the same reason that Tasha was just saying. It's that validation that, you know, you think I'm, you know, worthy of being in the honors program. Thank you so much. I mean, I had a student tell me that this winter who actually, he had already gotten his BA. He was just coming back to take a couple classes to qualify for another degree program that he was applying for. And so he was saying, you know, I really wish that I would have heard about the honors program earlier, and thank you so much for telling me that and for the encouragement. It really means a lot. So those kind of encouraging comments are never wasted. Even if they can't get into the honors program, you've just validated that student in an incredible way. So, you know, please feel free, recruit. However, and we're working on things to help recruiting right now, because we're in a very different recruiting world, because a lot of us are moving back on campus starting tomorrow, but obviously not the high numbers of students are, you know, because they're still kind of leaning more towards online courses. So if you have a mixture of those, please recruit. If you see students who are, you know, doing really well in your classes, please send them our way. And I'm going to be sharing some more things coming up soon that I have coming into place to do more recruiting, but nothing beats the professors telling the student that they should be in the honors program. And I just have a few minutes left, so any last questions?
I have a question, and this is partly based on my own time in college when I took a couple of honors classes. I led those classes. I learned to read properly and take notes. But then I also didn't get as much narrative, like actual content, because we were more focused on process. So I'm wondering, those of you who teach honors courses, are you having to teach more thematically to provide the time, you know, to scaffold the research projects and that type of thing?
I have an answer, but before I give my answer, does anyone else want to share anything? Okay, so I basically give them the same reading materials as my non-honors, and then sometimes they'll have an additional like ethnography or something that I wouldn't give to the non-honors students. So they get a little bit extra reading, but for the most part it's the same. And so I'm not skimping on the content. They still have to watch the same videos and things like that too. So what I end up doing is expecting more from them on the outside of class level, right? So they have to still do the reading and still watch the videos, but when they come to class, that's sort of a flipped classroom concept. Does that make sense? So that when you're having those discussions, you're not losing that content. Does that make sense?
It does, but a lot of, you know, I do have a lot of lecture in my courses. They're interactive, but I'm just thinking how I would replace that, because I have like two different types of classes that I teach. Some of them, like 107, 108, are largely lecture based. We have a lot of discussion days, but it's not integrated all the way through. For women's history, and when I taught African American history, there's a lot more discussion, but I do have to choose what I want to include so that I can make space for that. And I think both choices are fine. I'm just wondering, you know, if you're really ingrained in teaching, say 108 a certain way, in making that leap.
Because here's what I would say. If you already have a lot of interactive components, you may not need to change that part of your class. You might just want to think about, okay, how could I take this even deeper? So maybe that's where you add a research project that helps them pick up one of those topics and delve deeper into it. Do you see what I mean? Like maybe because it's history, you could look, and I don't know if what you're doing already, but you know, maybe you could have them look at how does something in history mirror what's going on today, for instance, right? So women's history is one of the ones that you mentioned, and African American history. Obviously, we know a lot of the things that were happening in the past, we're still dealing with today, right? In some form. So maybe you could have them do something like that so that they understand, why is knowing your history important, right? Because these things are still going on, and what you know about your history influences what's happening today. Does that make sense?
That concept makes sense to me, but I'm just thinking, I guess what I'm asking is, for the research project, is something that you start with from the very beginning and it's in lieu of other smaller projects?
I
Is
do.
that true?
Yeah. So I give them, I give them the directions for it around week 3. And then they have a couple weeks to come up with the abstract / proposal.
Okay.
And then they turn that into me, and then I grade that pretty quickly because I'm looking to make sure, are they on the right track? Are they not? What do I need? Or even if they're on the right track, I might still want to say, okay, I want you to think about this, this, and this, right? Or, ooh, this is a great topic. Think about these ways that it ties to anthropology, you know, in a broad way. Not that I'm giving them the answer, but things that like, or this is a great topic, but I don't see the anthropology. How are you tying that back, right? Get back to me, update this and get it back to me. So it gives you some wiggle room to, so like that proposal, they're just picking their topic, they're looking at, you know, how anthropology fits into it, and that's it. So as long as I can see those components, we're good. And then the second phase is the annotated bibliography. So they have to then have 3 scholarly sources, which they've summarized and things like that. So it's giving them that skill, but it's also helping me see, did they pick good resources? Because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Right. And so I can say, okay, these 2 are great. This one's not going to work. So you need to replace that one. Or these 3 are wonderful. Or none of these are right. Or you gave me the reference, but not the summary. Like that's not what an annotated bibliography is, you know, things like that. So it's another space for me to catch if there's an issue. Right. And then the paper comes at the end of the semester. And by the time I get the paper, usually all of the kinks have been worked out, and almost always they're A papers, almost always, because, you know, I've worked with them on it. So yeah, I would say think of it in chunks that give you a couple spaces that you can kind of direct them. And you could even have them, if you wanted to maybe do like a group thing together, you could have them share their proposals in a think, pair, share, or a small group, and they could work out with each other like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, or did you think about this, or what about that? So you could do it in that space too, and then have them move forward. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it, and that's where you want to experiment and try things out. And if it feels like it's a lot of extra work, then it's probably not good for you or them. So you want to try and figure that out. And I have 1 minute left, so I will stay after if anyone would like to chat for a minute, but then I have to get going. And I just want to share, Tom put in the chat that his lectures are pre-recorded online and then assigned as homework. So this is part of that flipped classroom idea. And then that facilitates class discussion of the material, which allows for examples and clarification from me and the students themselves in class. So there's those kinds of options. And I do that too. I've been teaching my honors as hybrids. So they have some lecture that they watch that's recorded, and I have them watch the streaming videos on their own and do handouts and bring those handouts with them to class. And so then when we come to class, we can talk about things more. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that the examples were helpful, and you're very welcome. And oh, let me share my screen really quickly one last time. I just wanted to give you my contact information in case you would like to get in touch with me. Here's my email address right there. So feel free to get in touch with me, send me an email. I'm happy to chat with you and to work on this with you. And yeah, great exchange.